There was nothing else at all in the whole world but football.
Hello and welcome to the Triple F for another episode of Under the Floodlights. This week I'm joined by West Ham and St Pauli fan Mike Stebbings to talk about one of his favourite players of all time, Julian Dicks. Julian the Terminator Dicks is considered a legend amongst most West Ham fans for the physical, aggressive, fully committed and intense way he played the game. He scored a very respectable number of goals for a left back, which Mike and I discuss, but it was his warrior-like performances on the pitch that drew the most attention. Considering Dixie was an icon and symbol of a previous era in which players like Roy Keane, Stuart Pearce and Vinnie Jones all flourished, the discussion with Mike transcends into a comparison between the past and modern generations of football. I really hope you guys enjoy as Julian Dicks goes under the floodlights. When you said you wanted to cover Julian Dicks, the first thing that sort of came to my mind was hard-hitting, physical player. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. But, I mean, if you can kind of guide us through this and describe what kind of player Julian Dicks was.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Dixie's always known for his, as you say, hard-hitting. With a nickname of the Terminator, you expect nothing else. And it's the one thing that a lot of people will always think of him. When you think about Julian Dicks, you think about his disciplinary record and, some of the horror tackles that he might have put in, or the little niggly things like he stamped on a Chelsea player's head and stuff. This is all the sort of stuff that's picked in people's minds. He was so much more than that. And as a young lad growing up watching West Ham, he was just something else. Yes, we had better players technically. Yes, we had fantastic goal scorers, with your Cotties and stuff like that. But for me, he just stood out head and shoulders above everyone else for the passion, the commitment. Things that people don't realise about Dixie as well is that while he's also remembered as being like the lead penalty taker during his time there, he actually scored a total of 64 goals, I think. Yeah, 64 goals. Now, for a left back, there's centre forwards out there who, as I say, there's at least half of those penalties. But as a left back, when there's centre forwards, and I'm sure you'll cringe when you hear the name Francis Jeffers, he hasn't scored as many goals as Dicks has as a centre forward. And I think that kind of record is just absolutely phenomenal. And all these little things that people don't realise about him, anyone that wants to learn more, get on YouTube, watch videos of him. He was just a phenomenal player. And if you take the disciplinary aspect away, there's a reason why Liverpool signed him. He's a player of quality. Probably didn't play as many games as we would have liked because of his disciplinary record, but that's what he was about, Let's be honest about it as well. In his time, Man United, Andrei Kanchelskis, Arsenal, Mark Overmars would have you'd look at the fixture of the coming week and you'd see, you're playing at Upton Park and you know that you're going to be facing Julian Dicks on that right wing. You're like, oh, my hamstring's a bit tight. I wouldn't have wanted to face him. I look at modern footballers and there's not really any players that I would sort of go, oh, I wouldn't want to play against them, as a centre forward, an attacking midfielder. There's no sort of defenders that sort of make you go, oh, I'm not looking forward to that. He was one of them. He would have terrified me senseless, to know that I was coming up against him. And I think as a psychological aspect, as well as, his pure quality, he was a terrifying player to play against.
First of all, thanks for bringing up Franny Jeffers. That's going to give me nightmares. Second of all, when it comes to thinking of other fullbacks that have taken penalties, Lauren was another one that sort of springs to mind as an Arsenal legend, I suppose you could call him. And yeah, I would call him an Arsenal legend. He was part of the Invincibles, but even him as a sort of penalty taking fullback, I don't think he got anywhere near the amount of goals that Julian Dicks got. So that's just incredible in itself. And that amount of goals for a fullback is, it's not to be sniffed at.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, before doing this, I thought I better just brush up on some of my stats and facts. I mean, I love the player myself, but it's like the things that sort of people don't realise. He scored 35 penalties. So out of 64 goals, 35 of them were penalties. He only ever missed 4 penalties. Now, that's a phenomenal conversion record. And in the 95-96 season, he was actually West Ham's joint top scorer with Tony Carty. You know, for a fullback to sort of take those kind of accolades, it's just, it's something else. You know, and as I say, throughout his whole career at West Ham, not his Liverpool days and stuff as well, but just at West Ham, scoring 64 goals in 315 games. That's a conversion rate of almost 5 games per goal.
Yeah.
There are, as I said, centre forwards out there who don't score that. You've got attacking midfielders and stuff who, yes, they create goals and stuff, and I'm sure he did. I couldn't tell you how many assists he has, but they will never reach those kind of goal scoring feats that he did as a left back. And I think that's such an important thing that people don't realise, that he contributed so much. And those goals are the kind of thing that for a team of West Ham standing at the time, those goals could have saved us from relegation. You know, and kept us in the Premier League, and he could have made us millions of pounds and stuff just on keeping us in the Premier League. And it's just, that's the thing. People don't see him like that. They just remember the tough tackling, the 2-footed challenges and stuff. And it's these are the things that people need to know about him.
Yeah. No, it's great to hear that, and great to sort of find that out about him as well. But one thing I'd like to know is, because it's something that I've mentioned a lot of times on the show already, and I'm sure the listeners are starting to get fed up with it. But when a player or a manager goes to a certain club, there are a lot of the times throughout that player or manager's career where it just doesn't work. They're not at the right club. The chemistry just isn't working. But when they do, it's just a beautiful thing to witness. And I think you can more or less say that with Dixie, in the sense that things didn't work out too well for him at Liverpool. I think it wasn't like a flop. I don't think that would, be fair to sort of label it as a flop. But however, I don't think he had the career at Liverpool that he did have at West Ham.
No, completely. He was signed for Liverpool by Graham Souness, and I think Souness had the vision of sort of really toughening up the team, not necessarily sort of with Dix's disciplinary record, but as a player, they had Ruddock at the back at the time as well, and when you've got him and Dicks in the same team, I mean, it happened at West Ham for a while. Obviously, Ruddock came play for us as well. But, I think that's what Souness really wanted to do. He wanted to put that aggression and that strength in his defence. That's not the Liverpool way. Even back in the 90s and stuff, Liverpool have always been an attractive team to watch, obviously, with the titles from years prior and stuff as well. He's not a Liverpool-style player by any stretch of the imagination. And when Souness left Liverpool, Roy Evans came in, and he wanted to go back to that kind of that nice football, that the attractive football that Liverpool play. So obviously players like Dicks have got no chance of ever seeing the first team again. But as you say, I mean, I would say, yes, it's a flop. It's not necessarily a blip in his career. He pulled on a Liverpool shirt, I'd say, But I think he was there about a season, just over a season. Obviously, transfer windows were different back then. But, he still played 28 games for Liverpool and managed 3 goals as well. Now, I'm sure there was probably a few penalty takers ahead of him. So, they could have come from open play. I'm not sure. It's Liverpool. I'm not really that fussed about it. But he still managed 28 games for him, and that's quite an impressive thing when you sign for one manager and another manager comes in and doesn't fancy you. You still manage to actually accumulate quite a few goals games in that respect.
Out of because obviously there were the 2 stints that he had for West Ham, pre-Liverpool and post-Liverpool. I mean, in your sort of mind, which of the 2 stints do you think were his most successful? Because I know obviously with the latter stint, he scored less goals. Or I mean, do you look at them in a comparable way at all? Or?
I mean, for me, I was obviously in his first sort of period with West Ham. I was a lot younger and stuff, so his second period was the more memorable years of when he was playing for us. So I think that kind of sticks out in my mind. Probably, I don't necessarily think they're comparable, but for me, that's what I more remember. So yeah, I think he was just an ideal fit for West Ham. So, you know, whether it be the first period or the second period, I think he was just the kind of player that we needed.
Mm. And why is it mostly because of his sort of physicality on the pitch that the fans took to him so well, or do you think there was something else behind it as well?
I think so. I think it is a part of it. I can't deny that, you know, it's not necessarily the style of football that I'd appreciate, but at the same time, I think it's something that a lot of the fans would really love. It's passion and commitment at the end of the day. I mean, there are the times when you know, it kind of crossed that line, going from passion and commitment to overzealous and verging on GBH, you know, kind of some of the stuff he
Kung Fu kicking people in the chest.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There was an incident, I can't remember who it was with, but it's something that I read while I was doing my scrubbing up on the stats and stuff, as it were.
Yeah.
And then he randomly elbowed a guy in the head whilst on the pitch, and he actually has come out years later and gone, no idea why I did that. It just got into my head that that's what I was going to do, and I did it. And it's kind of like, he had those instances where it crossed the line, but I think that commitment and that passion and that never give up kind of attitude that he carried with him as well, and that's the sort of thing that really endears West Ham fans. Even nowadays, you know, yes, they're sort of riding high on that bubble at the moment, been in 5th place, but previously, you know, I've spoken to many West Ham fans and they've said, we don't care if we win, lose or draw, as long as the players leave it all out there on the pitch. And that's something that he did with every game that he played. Quite literally left it all on the pitch, as well as parts of other players at times as well. So,
yeah. It's kind of strange in a way that, because obviously there's a lot of similarities there with the likes of sort of Vinnie Jones and Stuart Pearce, and just that sort of real physical way, Roy Keane. I mean, it's a type of football that it's just no way you would ever imagine seeing anything like that nowadays, because I mean, most of the time it's quite non-contact. But do you think that perhaps the Premier League, in a way, because I think the Premier League was established in '92, and perhaps because it's almost sort of chalk and cheese, just the way that, you know, before the Premier League was in its you know, it more or less became the Premier League. Before that, don't think there was so much sort of media production or behind making, or the branding of the Premier League wasn't as sort of Hollywood as you sort of saw it as it became in the 90s. It seemed to me that you had your sort of figures like Vinnie Jones and sort of Razor Ruddock, but I think a lot of those characters were kind of like blunted out a little bit, and maybe it's the Premier League kind of tried to change their perception of fans' perception of those kind of players. Do you think Julian Dicks was perhaps a sort of victim of that in a way?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you look at, as you said, you know, you look at the modern football nowadays, and players like Dicks and Ruddock and Roy Keane and stuff, they'd have eaten them for breakfast. You know, the players are like that. And I think in that respect, I think the Premier League has tried to sort of, and you know, I would also include leagues like Spain and stuff in there as well. They've kind of gone for that Hollywood kind of feel to it where, well, I mean, I couldn't name you another player that is in the similar sort of mold as those guys nowadays. You know, you've got great defensive midfielders. Obviously, we'll mention Declan Rice in that, but Makelele, players like that, but none that had that sort of aggression and commitment, for want of a better phrase, that those players had. I think they have genuinely moved away from that kind of style of football. And I think it all comes down to the grassroots aspect of it as well. Players like that will get sort of sidestepped for the flair players and for the footballers. And I say that, you know, the footballers, I mean, sort of like, you look at the centre backs now compared to sort of, you know, your Ruddocks and your Tony Adams and players like that.
Vinnie Jones.
They were proper defenders.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at the modern ones now, you know, your John Stones and
required to play out from the back, really, aren't they?
Yeah, they're more like the old central midfielders as opposed to the old defenders. It's almost like the position has kind of moved back, and yeah, everything is recycled from the back, and they tried to sort of use that, and rather than the old no-nonsense defenders, they were there to stick the foot in and hoof the ball downfield, let the classy players deal with that kind of thing. Nowadays, it's all built from the back. It's all pass and move. And yeah, I can't help but feel part of that is the way that it's wanted to become across. It's almost like becoming that WWE kind of thing. It's almost a little bit fake to a degree because they don't have those kind of players now. But yeah, I mean, if they did, they'd spend more time on the bench, not in the bench, in the stands, sorry, because of their discipline records than they would have done on the pitch.
Part of me thinks that, you know, in a way, it's good for the sort of the health aspect of a lot of the players, because I think if it were to continue that way, you'd see a lot of dangerous fouls just crossing over into, you know, serious sort of, I wouldn't say life-threatening, but there'd be career-threatening injuries if that type of football were to allow to continue. So in a way, it was good that it evolved to a point where you know, a lot of players were their safety was taken into a lot more of an account. And, you know, it is a safer game to play. However, it's gone way, way too far into a sort of soft touch. Well, a bit of it's become a no contact sport essentially. And I think there are a lot of things that accumulate into fans losing sort of passion and losing the interest in football. But I think that's one as well. Just seeing how much of a contrast and how much of a difference there is between that old era, between that sort of, you know, the Vinnie Jones era, shall we say, and the era that we've got now, where it's, I hate to use the word namby-pambies, but it's the only one that sort of comes to mind at the moment. But the term namby-pambies, it's, you know, it's essentially kind of what we're seeing on the pitch at the moment. And it's it is hard to take, but at the same time, it's nice to put your sort of nostalgic cap on and look back at that era, and to look back at that era with fondness as well.
Oh, completely. And as I said before, you know, anyone who wants to brush up on the Julian Dicks knowledge, kind of get onto YouTube and stuff and watch them. But I think anyone that does that might be shocked to see how the football was played back then. You know, how there was that kind of physicality behind it.
Yeah.
You don't get that nowadays. And I think, you know, any kids that kind of watch football from the 90s would be shocked to see some of the challenges that will get put in. You know, one of the things that really, really grates me nowadays, and something that a lot of probably old defenders and stuff would no longer kind of get away with, is the use of elbows when jumping for headers and stuff like that. The amount of fouls that get given for kind of stuff like that. But realistically, kids will watch that kind of, Alan Shearer going up for a header with Tony Adams or something like that, and you'll see the elbows right up in his face. Yeah, you don't get that nowadays. It's too, as you said, non-contact, mate. It's become very soft and very watered down on the passion and the commitment side of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because what I found interesting when I did a little bit of, sort of digging into Julian Dicks' his highlight reel, shall we say, is there was one incident where I can't remember who the opponent was or which team it was, but Julian Dicks basically performed something out of a Bruce Lee movie. It's just this real huge high-flying kick, and it went. Julian Dicks' studs was straight in this fella's chest. But I think it's like you're saying, just from that time, from that era, there was just hard men everywhere, because the way this guy took it like it was like a bit of wind against his face. He just sort of brushed it off, carried on. And
he probably got a yellow card for it, kind of thing as well. It's kind of what was it? Yeah, the other one as well, actually, saying about the elbows, another one that really grates on me as well is the high boot. It's anything above waist height nowadays, whereas the amount of people that would come off the pitch with stud marks down the side of their face and stuff back in the day, you don't get that now. And as you say, I completely agree from a player safety aspect. We don't want to see people's careers ended by horror challenges or stud marks and scars and stuff then left in legs and faces and chests. It needed to be toned down, but I think it has gone too far. And it's scary. As I say, anyone watching these games on YouTube, mate, they'll be horrified by what they're seeing.
Because I think with you and I, we were obviously we've grown up with that type of football, and it's even then it's kind of hard to sort of fathom how grown men got away with a lot of stuff like that, and how they got away with just walking away from a lot of the incidents as well. But I think if kids, like you say, nowadays that are not really accustomed to that type of football, I think a lot of them would have heart attacks.
Players like say your Ronaldos and your Messis and stuff like that, they're all about that beautiful football, don't get me wrong, and quite often people sort of say, are they up there with the greats, with the Pelés and the Maradonas and stuff? I think one thing that people you kind of have to relate is, Maradona and Pelé were fantastic footballers. They were absolutely beautiful players, but they played against your Julian Dickses and your Ruddocks and your Roy Keanes and stuff. And that's the thing, if you look at those kind of players, if you brought them into the sort of modern football now, the stuff that they could do with the time that they would get on the ball and the way they would be able to sort of basically embarrass modern footballers nowadays. As I say, Pelé and Maradona, what was that, in the 80s? So, that would have been the days of your traditional defenders. I know Dicks was your 90s and same as Ruddock and Keane and stuff, but it's not like they went through an evolution of having beautiful football to this kind of more physical aspect and back to the beautiful football. They played against those kind of players. And I think that as well is what people don't realise, and why I think they should be put on another level, well above your Ronaldos and your Messis. Don't get me wrong. Great footballers, but not playing against the same physicality that those guys would have been back then.
I wholeheartedly agree, because I one of the sort of planned questions that I've got for one of my regular co-hosts in another sort of Triple F show is to bring up that cliched, Ronaldo, Messi conversation, because it's going to be inevitable before we sort of bring it up. But I don't think that the only two GOATs, shall we say, the greatest of all time, I don't think it's between those two. Like you say, I think it's Maradona. I think Maradona and Pele. But personally, I just love Maradona. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just personal preference, but just the absolute character that he was, and just the way that he played the game, just absolutely awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping. Just what a player! And like you say, an absolute aspect that Ronaldo or Messi, they hadn't had to deal with that throughout their careers. Maybe Ronaldo towards the early part. I mean, it was sort of the early 2000s and where he'd have to deal with that physicality, but it was nowhere near the level of what Maradona had to deal with, because he got the layers of shit kicked out of Maradona. There were some games where he was absolutely kicked out of the game, and it was normal. Refs would just allow it to go on. But that's why I personally think Maradona is the greatest of all time. It's because he knew how to deal with getting the shit kicked out of him, and he still played the game in this beautiful, incredible way. And that's just incredible to think of it now, like how really he, a lot of time he tried to sort of jink his way out of these challenges, but he got kicked, and he got kicked hard as well. But my God, he still scored some of the most amazing goals ever seen.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And the other side of it as well is, like, you look at modern boots and modern balls and stuff like that. Modern balls being so much lighter, and boots with the, your old school Adidas Predators with the grooves in to make you. They didn't have that. They literally just had the skills and the techniques, and footballs that were more like your medicine balls at school. They were rock hard. Yeah. And some of the stuff that they could do is just, And then, as you say, you had the butchers that were on the field who literally just wanted to take chunks out of them. And they still produced the moments that everyone kind of, look up to when they're kids watching football. I mean, nowadays you'll see the 10 and 11-year-olds, worshipping Messi and Ronaldo and, even maybe Ronaldinho, going back a little bit, but, they'll watch those kind of players and see the skills and stuff. But go back to the 80s and stuff and before, when you've got players like that who can do it under so much more pressure, and so much more physicality. You can't knock it.
Yeah, it's almost like an extra attribute that you get on like a Pro Evo game or a FIFA game or a top trumps card, because nowadays it's all about, like you say, like skill, technicality, speed, shooting, all of those sort of, your general things. But back then, toughness was a thing as well. We're just being able to absolutely, just endurance, being able to take a kick to the neck or whatever it would be.
Yeah, and literally, how much blood could be seeping from your shins before you actually had to go off the pitch, kind of thing. It's just, it's just insane. And they still made these defenders just look stupid.
Yeah,
they just leave them sat on their ass while they run rings around them. Regardless of how many times they tried to put their foot through them, it just made them look silly.
I know you've tried to think of a sort of similar player nowadays, but I mean, there is a player that springs to mind for me, and I know it might seem that I'm being a bit biased because as being an Arsenal fan or whatnot, but when I see Kieran Tierney, he's not. I mean, he's physical, because there's been a lot of stories from that have come out of London Colney, the training ground. A lot of his fellow Arsenal teammates have said to it, or they've made complaints that Tierney goes in a bit too hard in training. Tierney's one of those that doesn't hold back in training. And when I heard that, I just thought, this guy's in the wrong era. Essentially, he's in the wrong era, because he's probably, but at the same time, he's still got that aggression, he's got that physicality, And maybe he's just clever enough and savvy enough to know when to go in, when to make the right sort of challenges and so on. And it's good to see that with Tierney. No, he's not Julian Dicks to the sense that, he'll go kung fu kicking the crap out of other players. But in terms of giving it his all and pushing it to the line that he can push it to, it's kind of good to see that. And perhaps with Tierney, he might lead the way for this type of player to sort of make a bit of a comeback into the Premier League. Let's hope so anyway.
Yeah, I think it's something that's really lacking. I'm not, as you say, I'm not after, a butcher kind of coming in trying to take someone's leg off, because, player safety at the end of the day. And we don't want to see careers ended due to injury. I mean, another one of my favourite players, actually, and his career was ended far too early, was Dean Ashton. Dean Ashton was a great player. And unfortunately, his ankle went and it never fully healed. We don't want to see that kind of thing. Careers ended for 23, 24-year-old. Another one that we'll probably both share is Jack Wilshere.
Yeah.
A player who this is no sort of, it's not down to any particular player. It's not career-ending injuries and stuff like that that have been committed from a challenge, but no one wants to see that kind of thing. And I think they've done the right thing by removing some of it from the game. I think they've just gone too far now, especially with things like VAR as well. I am a fan of VAR, which is controversial enough in that respect, but I think that again, it's going too far. I can't think of another player who, Dicks really broke the mold for me especially as far as, fullbacks are concerned. He obliterated the mold when he came out. It was someone else. It's good to hear, actually, from, obviously your Arsenal knowledge, that there are still players that are sort of kicking around maybe a little bit that still have that passion and commitment. Funny that modern players are actually putting in complaints about him, putting in, a bit of a sturdy challenge kind of thing. But other than that, it's as I say, your old school sort of central midfielders, defensive midfielders, I should say. Your Roy Keanes, your Patrick Vieiras, they were also your kind of full-blooded players as well. But if you look at the modern ones now, like Declan Rice, he is a beautiful footballer to watch. And his challenges are so perfectly timed. If you'd have taken a player like Dicks or Roy Keane, I wouldn't say their challenges were ever perfectly timed. Their goal was just to get the ball by any means necessary. And I can't think of another player that is like that nowadays. There's no one that can match his goal scoring record for a fullback, in my opinion. Not the same level of aggression. But it was a different era. But I don't ever think there'll be another Julian Dicks. There'll never be another Roy Keane, because I think that element has just gone from the game completely. And there'll be another Declan Rice. I mean, he's a phenomenal player, but there'll be another player like him. He follows on from the Makalelis and stuff as well, who they just knew when to nick the ball from someone. They wouldn't go through the back of someone to try and win it. And, that's the way football has gone now. And I don't ever think we'll see a return to the likes of Dicks and stuff. It is just nice to hear, though, that there is still someone out there who just has that little switch that will just, it will just flip at maybe the right time. Someone who will probably go in slightly more full-blooded than the rest of the players. So, it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, because I think with Kieran Tierney as well, he's somebody that's, I think he's even gone past a sort of cult following from the Arsenal fan base now, because of his sort of down-to-earthness, because of his humility. There was a point where I think it sort of went out on Twitter and Instagram. He was walking around. I think all of them had the sort of Gucci bags and Gucci handwear and stuff. And Kieran Tierney was walking around with a Tesco's bag. So it just goes to show that being that kind of throwback, if you will, being that kind of guy that's just not a flashy show off kind of person. which is what we've more or less come accustomed to for the last 10, 20 years. So it's to have a player like Kieran Tierney, to have a character and a personality like that, and for that to be refreshing, it is good as well. And like I said before, maybe it's a sort of opening of a door to similar players that we might get to see of the sort of days gone by. But I mean, yeah, it's one that we have to hope for. I'm not going to be holding my breath for it, but yeah, we have to wait and see.
It'd be nice. It would be nice to see a bit more physicality. I don't know if it's kind of a nostalgia kind of thing, but for people like yourself and I who grew up on that kind of thing, it'd be nice to sort of even just 20% go back to that kind of thing. Relax some of the rules. As I say, the ones that annoy me with the high foot, and yes, let's not kick a player's head off, or the elbows and stuff. Players rolling around on the floor now when they've not even been, they might have an elbow brushed past them, kind of thing. It's lost that element for me, and I would love to hark back to just a little bit, not massively, but just to sort of bring some of that back to modern football, and sort of give some of these players a reason to actually dive out the way, as opposed to your Jack Grealish who just rolls around on the floor because someone brushed him with a whisker.
Yeah. Let's all. I think we'll all be keeping a close eye on Kieran Tierney for being the last glimmer of hope for professional footballs out there. But maybe as well, it's we're kind of looking and measuring aggression differently in football, because I think, like you say, we measured aggression as this, Vinnie Jones hard tackling, kind of breaking another player's legs type of aggression. Whereas nowadays, aggression is probably more about how the players press the ball and they press the opposition into making mistakes. Maybe that's how aggression is kind of sort of is kind of gauged nowadays.
Possibly, yeah, maybe more forcing the space rather than forcing the player kind of scenario. Possibly. You do look at the sort of challenges that go in nowadays. It's a lot less than sliding challenges. It was a thing of my generation watching the football and stuff. A good old sliding challenge on a wet, rainy day. Brilliant. Nowadays, it's more of a foot in and pressing that space. So you may be right. It may be a different way of showing their aggression and stuff, because they're attacking the ball and not necessarily attacking the player. So it's probably that striking difference.
It just made me think as well, because I think back then you could easily get away with getting the ball and taking the man out at the same time. Whereas, it didn't matter as long as you got the ball. If you broke the other guy's legs, you won't even get a yellow card for it because you got the ball. But whereas nowadays, if you get the ball and your momentum takes you into the opposition's player, then I don't know if a red card has been given for it, but I'm pretty sure you'd get a yellow card every time if you've gone in sort of recklessly, as they say. But in a way, I think as long as you don't go with your studs sort of showing and don't go, 2-footed, then I'd like to see that sort of decision brought back.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the thing. As long as there's it's that judgment call, and I think maybe VAR could actually be utilised in this respect. It's whether you did go to genuinely challenge to win the ball, or whether you intentionally went in to take down the player. I mean, one of the sort of key things here is it's like when there's a player breaking, and you make those cynical challenges, whether it's a pullback of the shirt or a trip of the heel, something to sort of slow them down. That's a yellow card offence, and that's fine because it's the aspect of denying that goal scoring opportunity. But I think with a challenge, you can make that decision now. The refs have got someone else watching over it, and they've also got the pitch side monitors where they could actually view this and say, right, was that challenge intentional to take the player, or was it a genuine attempt to win the ball? And I think it could help bring some of that nostalgic challenging from our era. It could help bring that back, but I can't ever see it happening, which is a real shame. But I think it's a way that VAR could be utilised.
I definitely share your views on VAR. I do think it's a great tool. I think it's a great piece of technology to have. However, it's a little bit like having a nice shiny Lamborghini and a great sports car, but then you let in sort of 5-year-olds drive it around, and then it's getting driven into a wall. I think the sort of officiating and the referees and the officials that are taking control of VAR, they're ruining it. They're ruining what essentially is a great tool, what is essentially a great assistant for this high-paced level of football that we have nowadays.
One thing I will bring up on VAR is, obviously, as you know, I'm a fan of German football. I've watched German football for quite some time, and they were one of the first top leagues to actually introduce VAR. So when I was watching it on there and I heard that it was coming to the Premier League, I was basing my views on VAR on how I'd seen it work in German football, and it was brilliant. Absolutely, it wasn't flawless. I won't maybe not go to that extent, but it was
a lot better than what we have in the Premier League.
Yeah, and yet we are now in. Is this our second season or third season with VAR? Can't remember, but we're still at this point where I'll go back to Thomas Souček got sent off the other day,
mate.
Right, and the disappointing thing about that was that the call came from the guy watching VAR, told him to go review it on the pitch side monitor. So was it Mike Dean? I think it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Went and viewed it on the pitch side monitor and deemed it a red card.
Yeah.
So he had the tools there. The guy was another guy was watching it, and they still came to the wrong decision. The following day, the FA overturned it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. It's things like that I think a lot of fans have a problem with for VAR.
Yeah, speaking about that incident specifically, because I believe that the issue there is it's essentially slow-mo. The amount of slow-mo replays that, because there was no, because I think what we see is what Mike Dean was essentially viewing. Just all of these slow-mos, and it was just slow-mo after slow-mo after slow-mo that Mike Dean was looking at. And if you slow that down, yes, it's going to look vicious. Yes, it's going to look malicious, but not at one time did Mike Dean actually look at that in real time. If you look at it in real time, it's a nothing. It's a nothing challenge. It's an absolute nothing challenge. And I don't know why the assistant referees, maybe the assistant referees, we don't know. And that's part of the problem as well. It's just not knowing. It's not being sort of put in the loop. It's not being told why they made that decision and so on. That for me is creating the frustration. It's creating and it's exacerbating this issue that we have. And it's exacerbating the frustration that the fans have with VAR. But if the assistant referee could have just told Mike Dean, look, that's a nothing challenge. But knowing Mike Dean the way that he is, he probably just ignored them and just did what Mike Dean does, and that's give players red cards. And you know, that's part of the problem as well, obviously.
And that's the thing as well. It wasn't that there was the Southampton player he'd sent off a few days prior in a very similar sort of situation as well. And it's just like, you've not learned from that same sort of situation. You've gone and done it again. And I think it was Lee Mason that was actually watching the VAR in the control room. He was the one who said, go watch it on the pitch side monitor. So that's the thing. Two referees viewed the incident and still deemed it enough to sort of be a sending off. Because if Lee Mason didn't think that it was a challenge that was worthy of something, he wouldn't have told Mike Dean to go review it. No. And that's the crazy thing. And as you say, it is. We've been given this beautiful tool, and we're just not utilising it. And you know, you kind of look at it now, and sort of going back to the whole thing about Julian Dicks and stuff. Can you imagine how many times he would have actually been sent off? Had VAR been in force then? You know, I mean, you relied on literally the referee and the two assistants to catch everything that he did. But yeah, he wouldn't have spent any time on the pitch. He'd have literally got sent off every time he walked on, because he was just, I mean, yes, it's a different world, as we said, but yeah, Julian Dicks and VAR would not have been friends.
No. Because I think I looked at it. He received about 35 yellow cards and only about 5 reds, which is actually, considering the type of player he was, that's quite a low amount. But yeah, if he was about in this day and age, I mean, he wouldn't even make it on the pitch. He'd just be suspended his whole career.
Yeah. He never would have been the player he was, because he would never have been able to get on the pitch. And that, that's the thing. It's. I think we said it before on the previous podcast, when the Premier League has become very sanitized, and I think that's part of the issue, is VAR. I love it. I've seen it work in other leagues, but our referees seem to ruin it. We've taken a beautiful thing and just ruined it, and now all the fans and stuff want rid of it, and it's here to stay, and I think we've got to accept it. I just think we need to be more on the case of the referees who are making poor decisions using VAR. And the offside rules and stuff that they literally give, you can't call those kind of decisions where he had a toenail in front of the other player, but because it's a part of the body you can score from, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, I think Dixie would have smashed up the pitch side monitor several times if he'd have been playing in this day and age.
I've got an idea for you to make the game more romantic and more how we sort of remember it. Why don't we make Julian Dicks head of the refereeing body? just imagine the amount of challenges that would come back into the game.
Yeah.
It'd be brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? Yeah, they need to get a panel of players like Dixie and Ruddock and Vinnie Jones. Dennis White is another one as well.
Stuart Pearce.
Sit down and rewrite the rules of football, and get them to sort of sit in the control room, see your Lee Masons and stuff watching the videos, just oversee what they kind of do. I guarantee that VAR would be sorted then, I'll tell you.
Probably be a lot of careers over, but hey ho, who gives a shit? Excellent. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of touch on about Dicks? Is there anything that comes to mind with Dixie?
The beauty of Dicks was you just got to watch him.
Yeah.
Anyone listening to this, anyone watching this, I strongly advise, regardless of what team you support, whether you follow Premier League football, whether you follow German football, Spanish football, wherever you are from, get onto YouTube and just watch him play. There must be highlight reels on there of all the penalties he's ever taken. There was no placing it in the bottom corner, no P-rollers or Panenkas or anything like that. It was just brute force and power. And, just watch the highlight reels, because it's well worth watching. It really, really is.